You're listening to Protect It All, where Aaron Crowe expands the conversation beyond just OT, delving into the interconnected worlds of IT and OT cybersecurity. Get ready for essential strategies and insights. Here's your host, Aaron Crowe.
Hey, welcome to the Protect It All podcast. I'm very excited to have my friend Dan on the call here today. Dan, why don't you introduce yourself, tell us who you are, and a little bit about your background and history.
Sure. I'm Dan Ricci. I'm the founder of the ICS Advisory Project. I am also a senior consultant with Ampex Cyber, and also I've done a lot of independent cybersecurity consulting. My background in cybersecurity really started in the Navy. I was in the Navy for 21 years, both enlisted and officer. I was a warrant officer. And I learned most of my skill set in incident response, vulnerability management, threat intelligence analysis, and offensive cyber operations during that time frame. After I retired, I worked for one of the big four doing consulting. And then after that, I transitioned back doing defense contracting work, doing cyber risk assessments and building automation systems, medium power distribution, also some water treatment as well. I pivoted back doing a role that was more senior information security officer role, establishing a cybersecurity maturity model certification, CMMC, more tied to the NIST 800-171 cybersecurity standards for a company called Frequentis Defense, and they manufactured embedded voice gateways. So I got a lot of experience doing product security as well, understanding how that relationship between the customers and cybersecurity works. Also got my hands really deep involved in supply chain risk management because of most of our customers that we were selling to were either in the DoD or U.S. government. So really heavily involved in risk management framework as well. So that was a good experience. I transitioned from there, working for a short stint with SynSaber, doing the research director position till their demise. And then I transitioned into a role at the INL, Idaho National Labs. And during that time frame over the year, I led the Cyber Shield program, which was focused on cybersecurity for renewables. I wrote the Malcolm deployment guide for solar power generation with the Malcolm team while I was there. I thought that was a good contribution to the community since it hadn't existed previously, to kind of show where you would deploy that guide into the into a power generation system. So, and I found that it was time for me to go out on my own. I finally decided to break off, and I had an opportunity to go work for Patrick Miller at Ampex, and I just went off and did that full time since this December. I transitioned. So really excited in this new role that I'm in. I feel that now in this new role, I have the capability to assist a broader group of clients in the energy sector, also in other critical infrastructure sectors, having that flexibility again, vice, the constraints of being with an organization kind of, I wouldn't say muzzles you, but it definitely limits on how you communicate a little bit.
100%, being prior Big Four, obviously, if you know me, you can probably tell, you can look at my LinkedIn and say who that is. And I loved my time with the Big Four. There's a lot of benefits. It opens a lot of doors having that, behind my title. I'm with XYZ company. But to your point, I would never be able to have this podcast. I would have to get everything ran through legal and for obvious reasons. It's not because they're bad. It's because there's high standards and SEC requirements and all these things that go into it that have nothing to do with cybersecurity. It has everything to do with because they're an accounting firm. and they do, SEC audits. And, if you don't know what we're talking about, take a look at Enron in the past. And Arthur Anderson, and that's kind of the big scandal that really forced all of these regulations and requirements upon these big four consultancies, and not just the big four, but any SEC auditor that's auditing the books of publicly traded companies. There are requirements for all their employees to have these, continuing education hours, and they go through your finances with a fine tooth comb, which, not to get political, but that's the whole thing that it boggles my mind, that our Congress and senators can invest in whatever they want. But me as a cybersecurity person at a big four consulting firm, I couldn't buy individual stocks because it was against the law, and they'd fire me for it and I'd be fined. So we figured out how to do it. It's just, we don't implement it for everyone. It's just the lowly people like me and you that are impacted by it. But anyways, I diverged down a path. Tell us tell us, first of all, I love Patrick Miller. He's one of my favorite people. Love all that you guys do. But definitely tell me a little bit about, you kind of breezed over it, but tell us about the ICS Advisory. What is that? And if you haven't seen it, the link will be in the show notes, but let's talk about that a little bit. And it's more than just a pretty dashboard. So talk us through, why'd you create it? What is it? And what, the kind of life cycle of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the ICS Advisory Project was born out of my experience of doing cyber risk assessments, both during my time with Deloitte and also when I went and was doing cyber risk assessments within the DoD, and
Sure.
realizing that the way organizations tracked vulnerabilities was inconsistent, and I thought it was pretty burdensome for organizations, especially small organizations where you have maybe one or two people that are trying to track vulnerabilities, and that exists all over the place.
Sure.
And I realized that, CISA was doing a great job, documenting, existing ICS specific vulnerabilities and providing a good report, but the report was done it was a HTML report, obviously. I mean, a website. Not everyone always goes and visit websites. But they also had to, sift through the different advisories themselves and read through them. And I thought, well, maybe we can make a way to filter this and make it really easy for them to find, I only care about these vendors. I only care about these products, and I want to understand, where these products are manufactured or who are their headquarters located at. I want to understand, the CVSS score, the severity of it, and start to break it down. And I was like, oh, well, I could take that, that information that was in previously in HTML format. Now it's in JSON through the CSAF format that they do, but provide it in a way that, and visualize it so they can quickly find what they are looking for, right? Like I mentioned with the vendors and products, then start to prioritize it visually and then create a means where they can export it, as like a CSV format. Cause, a lot of small, medium-sized organizations are working with, CSVs and Excel documents still. So lowest common denominator, right?
At best, right?
Because these small companies don't have, developers. They don't have a team to build tools, and they don't have the time either. So I thought I can make time to do this, and I can create a dashboard that could start to help them. So that was really the genesis of all. And it went through iterations. I mean, I was building the earliest forms of the ICS Advisory Project dashboards in pivot tables and slicers and, charts and graphs and Excel, and then building them out that way. And then sharing them with people and saying, and getting their input, on, do you think this is useful? I mean, what do you think about this? And when I was doing assessments at, in the DoD, I would create a leave behind document, or a leave behind Excel with a dashboard pivot table of all applicable CVEs for their, for their products, and leave that behind. I said, well, this is just a snapshot in time. I really need to build, something that is updated and maintained. And that's kind of where it came from on that. That's where it came from. Around 2020, in 2021, I started looking at like what platform I was going to put it on, how I wanted to build it. And, obviously, a lot of people use Elastic and use Kibana to build dashboards, but I didn't want to pay a significant amount of money or even a monthly fee for something that I was going to give up for free. So I discovered that, Google Data Studio, which is now Google Studio, was available and free, and I could build dashboards and provide them publicly. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And that's that's why I went this direction. And, could someone easily have done this in Microsoft Power BI? Yeah, absolutely. I built my first dashboards that were similar to the ICS Advisory Project dashboards in Power BI for internal use within the organization. So, building this public platform was really meant to kind of save a small, medium-sized asset owner the pain and hassle to build and maintain this, and give them a tool that they could just easily prioritize their vulnerabilities and start plan of action and milestones towards mitigations. And that's another really important point about, the society supervisors. They make the best attempt towards providing a list of mitigations towards addressing the vulnerabilities, where I think CVEs, they're great for going, here's the threat, here's the problem, but really doesn't talk about the solution unless you dig in and go into looking at the vendor's website, where at least CISA is making a really good effort to summarize it. Well, CISA and Idaho National Labs, I can't really leave Idaho National Labs in there because they really support and develop the advisories themselves, and then CISA turns them around and puts them out. But this is really important for, those asset owners to, not, sit there and, you don't want to sit there and pontificate about the vulnerability itself. You want to take action. And if you're looking at it from an OT engineer or asset owner perspective, they don't want to marvel at the problem. They want to fix the problem and move on and maintain their operational availability and integrity of their systems. That's what they want to do. And they don't want. So whereas most of the tools out there that are built, they're built from they're built by cybersecurity professionals, which, we are, but they're built towards that audience. You know what I mean? And they're built towards that user. I tried to cut the difference in my dashboards where they can also they can help that audience, a cybersecurity analyst, but they could also help an asset owner in starting to address their vulnerabilities. That was my thought process here. And I think that's where I continue to look at where I can make improvements, maybe make new dashboards that kind of help them identify, more rapidly identify the vulnerability severity, how severe it is, or whether if they're going to have to patch it now, later, or never, and that's pretty much been the methodology for, OT vulnerability management, right? Because you're in an environment that you can't just simply patch. There's a whole process to doing any sort of vulnerability patch management in an OT environment, because the risk to operational availability is so much higher than your IT environment,
100%.
Right. So those were all these things that were in the back of my mind thinking about, when I go and try and develop a dashboard.
Well, I think you hit on so much there, right? Is you saw a need, you saw a gap, you saw something that you could provide value, and I want to come back to that in a minute, because I'm seeing your shadow box behind you, and I want to talk about that transition that you made as well. But you hit on something that's really important, and most tools in this OT space are built for the cyber people. Again, so you and I also, hard hats up there. I came from an operational background as well, working in power plants, not just as the technology and cyber guy, but working outages, I wasn't an operator, but I was directly supporting operators. So I have a better understanding than some in just the cyber background, right? So to your point, the operator, and especially at small and medium-sized organizations, a lot of times that operator is the one that has dual hats. They're wearing the operator hard hat and make their primary responsibility is to make sure that the thing works. The process works, the plan is up and running, the manufacturer, they're sending widgets, whatever they're producing or doing, safe, available, reliable, etc. Their secondary, tertiary, maybe even fourth, fifth, or sixth responsibility down the list is cybersecurity, right? It's if I have time and I've done all the other things on my list, oh yeah, I also have to do these other things that are cyber related. So we have all these things. And when you say what you said just a minute ago, we don't just always patch, right? You take a cyber person out of an IT world and give them and drop them in an OT space and say, hey, I've got Windows XP and I'm not going to remove it and I'm not going to patch it. Their heads explode. Like, what do you mean? I know I sound like a broken record to the audience that's heard me talk about this, but I really want to beat that in. And there's other ways, like you can mitigate risk in a lot of different ways. And in OT, we mitigate things. In IT, of course, you would patch it. You'd kick off a Windows XP machine. You'd never let it on your network. There's just no reason for it. But in an OT world, that's just not the case. So there's a lot of other ways that I'm going to, in fact, many times I'm going to say, I'm not going to patch that because I'm afraid it's going to break. And I'd rather put a different mitigation, turn off services, put in an additional firewall, like restrict access to physically being in person. Like there's a lot of different things that you can do in this OT space that mitigates those things. But to your point, and what I love about your dashboard is, yes, it offers mitigation options, which is what CVEs do, right? They do tell you some things that, hey, I can, CVSS, it tells you my risk, but there is some mitigations on if you apply this patch, you'll fix this. Or if you disable RDP, right? If it's an RDP thing and I can't patch it, just turn off RDP and then I don't have to worry about it anymore, right? But to an operator, it's more about prioritizing and really truly understanding their risks and being able to make an informed decision of, and it's not always if or when. A lot of times it's when. Can this wait until my next outage? Can this wait until the vendor's on site to support this? So I have them install it on their equipment. So if it breaks, they're here to fix it. Because a lot of times that's what happens is these small entities depend upon their vendors. And when I say vendors, I'm usually talking about the big control vendors, the Rockwells, the Emersons, the Foxboroughs, the Toshibas, the Schneider, like all that type of stuff. They're depending on those vendors to be the subject matter experts in these spaces. And they're usually uncomfortable making changes to those environments because a lot of times they don't have the ability to change it. Or if they do change it, they're afraid that the vendor is no longer going to support it and say, you changed it, you broke it, it's yours. Good luck. And they're not willing to do that. So the risk, to your point, is far higher to patch it than it is to leave it unpatched because they know if they patch it and it breaks, they're hosed. Whereas if they leave it alone, more than likely the risk of the probability that a hacker is going to get that far in and all these other things are going to happen in a perfect storm is lower than the almost guaranteed risk that if they break it, they bought it on the flip side.
Absolutely. Yep. You hit on everything that we've encountered in the real world when you're like presenting like the list of vulnerabilities that you identified and seeing their reaction to like, we're not doing that. It's like, and you just gotta, and the part of it is you have to accept what they're saying and then you propose like a list of compensating controls to address it. So, okay, that's fine. Learn to live with these risks. These are the compensating controls you're going to implement, and you're going to include a playbook for instant response when something does happen, because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So have a plan in place. I'm very much becoming a mindset. I mean, I have the mindset now that, you just got to deal with it. You're right. Cybersecurity and risk are just part of the game, and bad things happen, and having a plan to address a plethora of different cybersecurity incidents is better than not having one. and that way you can kind of like live, you can function within your organization to be prepared to address cybersecurity vulnerabilities and threats to your environment. I mean, that's so generic how I said that, but you know, what I'm trying to say is I think there, instead of like, you know, the FUD, right, have a plan. And there's plenty of already written playbooks out there for addressing, you know, known cybersecurity vulnerabilities and preparing against threats. That it's not so much hard for the organization to do. What's hard is making the time to do it. And like
prioritizing, right?
And your point was resonated so much to me about, you know, the dual hatted, the guy that's dual hatted, that, you know, he's got a plethora of jobs to do already. And, you know, cybersecurity is like number 4 on his list, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we as a community, what can we do to kind of like help them do that, and how can we make it easy for them? So, you know, we live in the United States. We're very much a for-profit. We're a capitalist country, and everything is for profit. We really want to try and like help the community out as much as possible. And you know, I think consolidating and providing those resources and, you know, pointing those smaller organizations to their resources is probably the best thing that we can ever do to like improve, you know, these smaller asset owners that are critical parts of our critical infrastructure, because a lot of times they're the ones that are main suppliers within our overall supply chain itself in the United States. You know, even especially when it comes to manufacturing, right? You have I saw this when I was working with Toyota, and you know, Toyota was, I mean, I know they're not necessarily purely I wouldn't consider them critical infrastructure per se, but they're a major manufacturer that could have a major impact to a large group of customers. But anyways, they obviously they use local suppliers near their plants, you know, to you know, provide components. And you know, it's not like their cybersecurity, you know, requirements flow down to, you know, those suppliers, because we saw that like when, you know, Bashuko had a ransomware attack that affected and shut down operations for Toyota themselves. And that was a few years ago. So, I mean, the same thing can happen from a defense supply chain perspective, right? And it's part of the reason why, you know, CMMC was established to, you know, hold like contractors and also the subcontractors accountable to some cybersecurity standard, because there are supply chain risks to, you know, to the overall defense of the United States and the capability and our defense capabilities. So, I mean, I think, you know, trying to help those small organizations is really critical for us to, you know, maintain larger organizations' cybersecurity that directly impacts the United States. And I think this happens around the world as well.
Well, you know, what I love about, again, it's like I told you, it's the reason I started this podcast. It's the reason that, you know, I mentor people and talk to people that are looking for jobs and how do I get into OT or how do I do this, right? It's because, to your point, and I think we said this before we started recording, but you know, you and I only have so much time. I can only have direct impact on so many people and processes and technologies and programs and companies, right? I'm a consultant, so I travel and I've had my hands on a lot of different OT programs across big and small, from the largest power utility in the country to probably, you know, some of the smaller ones in the country, and kind of everything in between for manufacturing, et cetera. But I can't personally design and implement OT cybersecurity across them all. They're just too vast. But how can we impact and level up the playing field? Because at the end of the day, you said something that also important is I live in America. Overall, I live on Earth. I want the power to work in my country. And I want, whether it's in a small town or a big town. And, you know, same thing with our allies, you know, whether they're on a different continent, the things that we do here, what I love about power utility and a lot of these the 17 critical infrastructures is they don't really compete with each other, right? So they're very open to sharing lessons learned, what's working well for them, what didn't work well for them, all those types of things. So when I get two CISOs from two different power utilities, name whatever ones you want, they have no problem saying, hey, this is the OT program that we're doing. This is the technology that we're doing. These are the attacks that we've gotten recently, like all that type of stuff. Because when they share, rising tides raise all ships, they all get better. I've even seen a lot of the larger power utilities that are kind of helping their, little brother or sister or whatever the heck you want to call them, the local municipalities, because you look at a Duke Energy and they've got huge programs and teams of people and, all this type of stuff. But you look at a regional municipality and we get back to wearing multiple hats. They don't have an OT cyber staff. They don't have an OT SOC. They're not hiring EY or Deloitte or PwC because they can't afford it. But that doesn't mean they're not valuable. A chain's only as strong as its weakest link. So if we look at critical infrastructure across our country, yes, Toyota, like you talked about, Toyota's got a big, great program. But what about the smaller players? Again, Toyota's not critical infrastructure, but the analogy works. What about a smaller one that is, building 10 cars a year? Or the wastewater, the water municipalities are a great example of a critical infrastructure in our country that is struggling with budget. It's struggling with knowing where to start. It's struggling with resources and technology and all the things. And we do have some great programs in our country to help, but I find a lot of times that sometimes they're just sitting and they know that there's a bunch to do and they're just overwhelmed with where do I start? We haven't done anything. I don't have an OT cybersecurity person. I can't hire an EY. I can't hire a fancy consulting company. Where can I start? Which is what I love about things like, again, this podcast, but your ICS Advisory Project. Someone could take that and say, I have this control system. I have these devices. I have these things, and narrow down the list of infinite numbers of advisories that are available to just, these are the ones that are really just us. And then be able to prioritize that to say, this is my critical site. These are the systems that it has. These are the ones that are CVSS score 10. Let's focus on those first.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And while you're saying that, I remember the word altruistic. We don't always have the altruistic motivations to help these organizations, but we should. I think a lot of us can help out a lot. And I think there's a lot of people in our community that do help, right?
Oh yeah.
And there are a lot of resources. I think it's just, I don't know if we always get and communicate to the right group of people. We're really good at communicate with each other within the cybersecurity community, but going to the same cybersecurity conferences, great networking, great to see everyone, but we don't always touch all the other asset owners that truly need the help because one, they can't afford to go attend the conference themselves. Right. I think the efforts that are being done through the B-Sides conferences are really great. And I think those are a great way for, those smaller organizations to have opportunity to interact with a lot of fantastic cybersecurity professionals because those are smaller and they're usually they're across the United States, different cities and in the world. I think those are really, really great opportunities for asset owners and engineers to go to, but also start going to I think cybersecurity professionals need to start going to those conferences that are very specific to those critical infrastructure communities that they're trying to help. Right. And, if you want to help people in hydro, you go to Clean Currents. If you're going to go to, anything in the electrical sector, you go to GridSecCon. It really depends. I mean, find the sector that you're trying to help, and then go to that conference as a cybersecurity professional. Advice, going to the same cybersecurity conference that you go to annually, and go talk to these groups. Submit a paper and present there. I'll guarantee you're going to have some really good conversations that are different than the same conversations that you're going to have at other conferences. I think that's where we can be at. And maybe there are a lot more people doing this, but for me, I have found going to those other conferences way more rewarding.
Sure.
And the conversations have been more focused on how I could apply my skill set and helping them by, talking about, the state of the community.
Yeah. Well,
state of the cybersecurity community. That's what I mean.
Right. Yeah. But you there's something to that as well. Like, again, I want to continue to toot that horn of, the advisory program. Like, you legitimately built something because you saw that you believed that it could help the greater community. Now, not everybody has that exact idea, but I believe no matter where you are, whether you're brand new, you're a year in, I think we all have, ideas and benefits that can level up depending on your level of experience and expertise. But, if you're trying to break in, like, I've had a lot of conversations with people that are trying to get an OT cybersecurity or cybersecurity in general, like, find something, build something, right? And showcase it. We do this in development. Like, we see this with GitLabs and GitHub and things like that, right? As they build something and they share it and then they grow it and it turns into something. That's really where I see an opportunity for people. If you're trying to build something, or you're trying to get into something, build something, find a niche that is a gap. And it doesn't have to be, a full product. It can just be something, again, podcasts like I'm doing. You can presentations at conferences, the ICS Advisory Project that you've done. Like, there's a number of things that we can do to give back to the community. And the really cool thing about it is that people know you because of it. You build a brand, you build some credibility, and it helps you you're not selling that thing, but that thing opens doors because, oh yeah, you're the guy that does the podcast. Oh yeah, you're the guy that has the ICS Advisory Project. Like, I know you because of that. And that opens doors, just like I mentioned before, working at EY opened doors because I had that name behind me. But I also, having this podcast opens doors, like having cool conversations with people like you, because the other thing about our network and this cyber thing that you just talked about, right, is it is a pretty small environment and small network. Most of us know each other. It's really easy to say, I would not recommend Aaron because he's a jerk. Or yeah, I've talked to Aaron and he is the person that you see on the podcast or on social media. It's the same guy you'll go have a beer with in Tampa, right? It's the same person. Like, those are the types of connections, and it's such a small world. Like, that's how you break into this. I had a mentor tell me a long time ago, all business is a people business. And I say that a lot. But it's true. Like, when you realize that, I don't care if you're the sales guy, the CEO, the technical person, you have to be able to have these interpersonal connections to build trust, so that way you can move beyond. Because if we don't trust each other, then we're not going to work together. Whatever you tell me, I'm going to take with a grain of salt or sand, whatever. But once I trust you and I know who you are beyond just, you sent me an email and said, hey, try out my thing. Once I see who you are and I trust that, then it's going to mean more to me than just, oh, I randomly found the ICS Advisory Project, but I don't know what it is or what the value is. I don't know how much stock I'm going to put into it. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it takes time, right? It's not something that happens overnight.
No.
And it definitely took a while for the ICS Advisory Project to build up itself and become a recognized capability that's used within the community. But that was also the thing that I thought. I was like, well, I'm going to build this, and I don't know if it's going to get used or not, but I think it's cool, and I think I'll just build it anyways and see what happens.
Yeah.
And then, over time, you figure out ways to draw attention. I mean, I built pretty much the ICS Advisory Project through LinkedIn and building the connections there. And then, caught the attention of D.L. Peterson and other people that are really big in our community. And it started drawing attention to it. And then over time, I've had other conversations. I think my first webinar I ever did about the ICS Advisory Project was with Nozomi. Daniel Jablonski was very kind to invite me on to discuss it. It wasn't my best, webinar, because it was the first time I ever did, but it was the opportunity to talk about it, and and after that, I've had other conversations with other groups through on Hacked Planet and other podcasts. But I mean, these are been all great opportunities. Just like talking to you, Aaron, this is a fantastic opportunity to really kind of share the project and discuss how it can help the community and everything like that. But also, having these conversations and talking about our experience, shared experiences, lessons learned from working with the larger consulting firms, and the challenges that you encounter with being able to help the greater community when you're kind of you're stuck doing professional services or staff augmentation, only helping that one client can feel stifling.
Yeah.
So, and it over time, it doesn't feel like you're really developing your skill set more than just helping this same client do the same thing over and over again. When there's other groups that other clients or asset owners that you could really be helping. So, your podcast and having these discussions is really helpful to those asset owners that might not that don't have the opportunity to attend the conferences, and they can sit here and listen and learn and decide whether, hey, I liked what that guest said on your show on Protect It All, and understand, how that person's project or, website or services might be helpful to their organization.
Exactly. Right. It's finding that niche and finding, what do I as a person and my skill set bring to the greater community, and how do I double tap on that and expand on it? Right. And showcase it so that people can find it. I can show value. And that's how you grow. That's my career, over the last, more than 2 decades has been growing and learning, getting a role that I'm not quite qualified for and learning on the job. Right. Hey, by the way, tag, you're it. You're now the OT cyber guy. Before OT existed and anybody called it that, it was you're the OT cyber guy. I don't even know what that means, but okay. Right. But it was because I was willing to say, yeah, put me in, coach. And B, I was willing to put my ego aside and ask questions because I didn't know what I was doing. I'd been in a power utility a lot of my career, but not from that perspective. I was in a different role. So now I'm learning all this stuff. And a lot of people in OT are doing that now. Right. Or maybe again, going back to the shadow box on your wall, maybe you're transitioning out of the military, or you're changing careers from, one job to another. You were a lawyer or whatever the thing is, and you're wanting to get into cybersecurity. This is how you do it. Right. You see all these stories about all these requirements and degrees and 10 years experience for an entry-level job. That's just what HR says. None of the jobs I've ever gotten, almost any of the job, I can't think of a job where I actually just went to a website, applied for a job, and got the interview and then got the job. Almost every job I ever got was because I had a connection. Hey, Dan, it works for Patrick. Hey, Dan, are you guys hiring? Would you introduce me to Patrick so I can talk to him? And he's got a job opening that I'd be interested in, right? It's that. And then you say, hey, Patrick, I know Aaron. I was just on his podcast. I think he'd be a good fit for this role that you have. Why don't you give him a shout, right? That's how these things work. Going to the conferences, going to the networking things, being on stage, even if the first time you do it, you're not very good. That's okay, because it's at bats, right? It's getting up and not hitting a home run, getting up and getting thrown out, striking out, all those type of things until you get better at it, right? Yeah. It's really easy in my career where I focus 100% on technology and being the best firewall engineer or Active Directory person or Exchange or whatever the role or the job that I was in. I wanted to be the smartest in that role. And I got to a place in my career and I read a book, and it's called, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And it literally means that, and you see it all the time where your top performer in a technology role, especially an engineer or whatever, they're their best person, and you promote them to a manager or a leadership position, and they struggle because they haven't focused on honing those skills. And it is a different skill set, just like it's a different skill set to be an operator of a power plant and be an OT cybersecurity person at a power plant. Even though you're dealing with the same technology perspectives, it's a different focus. So some people can wear those hats and do them well, but it's all about learning and being willing to ask those questions and reach across the horn. So for you, transitioning into all these things that you did in your career, all the way back from being in the Navy, coming into the civilian world, going to international labs, like all the things that you talked about, talk about some of that, the lessons learned, and maybe even some of the struggles that you had along the way in your career to get where you are today.
Oh yeah. I mean, the whole thing that I was thinking about as you were going through that, going through, talking about the transition and things like that. I think a lot of people, the hardest thing to accept is like risk. Life is about risk, and you have to take risk. Yep. And you have to go do things that you're not comfortable doing, because you'll never grow. That is the heart and I didn't get that when I was a kid, because I was a very shy, emotional kid when I was growing up. I did not have a great childhood. Wow. Not everyone had a great childhood. You get in line. So I'm not like, this is not a pity party here. Right. But when I took the leap to join the Navy, because that was so far from who I was as a person. Mm-hmm. Because, I wanted to I just wanted to change. I needed a big change to get in my life and my environment. And I needed to, move away from where I was at, because I knew I was never going to see the world where I was heading in my life. And I needed to take that risk. Life is about risk, and we have to take risks, and you can't be afraid of risk. When I decided to join the Navy, that was a great unknown. And, for me, that was a risk, because obviously you could go to boot camp and fail, mm-hmm. But I did as best I could to prepare. I went to boot camp. During boot camp, I failed my first PT test. Wow. Who doesn't when you're like, I wasn't fresh out of high school. I joined the Navy 3 years after I graduated from high school, and, did the grind, working on the trucking docks in Chicago, loading trucks, not having a college education, worked part-time at a record store, loved music at that time. So that was like the fun job, but, working mm-hmm. 6-7 days a week was a bit of a grind. So I joined the Navy. I thought, I know I was interested in the intelligence field. So I had at least I had an idea of what job I wanted to do in the Navy. Sure. And actually ended up going to the intelligence community, but not as an intel analyst. I ended up going into the communication side. But, all that, it was just kind of like accepting those changes, because all this was like a bunch of unknowns, right? Mm-hmm. You have to be comfortable with all those unknowns. And then you're going to go in and you're going to have like all sorts of like imposter syndrome and everything like that. But all that, uncomfortable feelings, you learn to like live with that. So, as I went through like, boot camp, the schooling I had to go through, because I had to go through a school called Job Oriented Basic Skills, because I didn't have a fantastic ASVAB score. I hadn't been in school for 3 years. I wasn't a great student in high school. So, but I went and, I learned and did the best I can. I did really good at that. Then I went to A school, and I just kept on, I had really good mentors in the Navy, and I embraced that. I didn't shy away. I literally grew up, during those first like 4 years in the Navy. I had to and I had some really good mentors. Did I have ups and downs? Yes. And then I decided like, hey, I met, I had another leader. She was an air crewman, and I thought, I think I would like being a naval air crewman. So I went to naval air. I decided to get myself in shape. It became a really avid runner, swimmer, and I went to Naval Air Crewman Candidate School in Pensacola, and I made it through. I went through SEER school. I went through all these other, schools that were designed to challenge me and grow mentally and emotionally to deal with very difficult situations. And, all those things, all those schools and training made me more resilient. Right. I'm not, does everyone get mad and doesn't always handle things the most professionally and excellent? Yes, absolutely. Those schools don't prepare you for those things. They prepare you for the certain situations. But, each of those schools though made me more disciplined and willing to like take risk, study as best I can, because in the military, it's a very competitive environment. And through that competition and through, your peers and everything like that, and your mentors, they make you stronger. They make you better at areas that you wouldn't normally be good at. And like in school, in high school, if you don't grow up in a home that kind of like builds that discipline and instills it in you early on, you're not going to have it when you just grow out into like the regular world, unless you go into the military and you may or may not get good mentors. That is a crapshoot. That is also a risk as well, depending on like the field of, depending on your job field in the military. Because the military is a cross section of the United States. Right. People from all over the United States with different backgrounds, ethnicities, but that's part of the strength of the military, because at the end of the day, everyone's there to get the job done. Right. But I digress. But all that training that I outlined, even though it wasn't technical training per se, a lot of it was physical and mental. When I crossed over from being a communications specialist, being a CTO, communication technician operator, to being a computer technician network, which is CTN, which are now they're cryptologic technician, or now they're cyber technical warfare specialists. Anyways, they changed the rating. Anyways, I digress. But anyways, when I became more of a network analysis guy and I got into cyber defense and cyber operations, I was more disciplined, more mentally prepared to go through that and get through those schools and actually apply those skills in real world operations that I probably wouldn't have had, right, early on in my career. And it just kind of gradually built. But like I said, the mentors, the people that you keep in your life that are positive and uplift you, those are the people that you need to excel. Are you going to make mistakes? Yeah, absolutely. Did I fail? Did I have issues with tests? Subnetting kicked my ass. When I was first learning how to subnet, I was not great at it. But once I learned it and did it over and over again, I can do subnetting very well. Reading binary, that took time as well. All that is just, you just practice, you work with people that are going to help you overcome those challenges. Anyways, but you get the point. The military is like a great organization to get that experience. But there's also, it doesn't all have to be done through the military. You can find that within your organization or within this community itself, within the cybersecurity, the OT cybersecurity community, to help, mentor you towards your goals.
Yeah. And I think that's the piece that I love the most. And I'm a huge advocate for, veterans and working with people that served. And the main reason that I love, having people on my team and that come from prior military is kind of that journey you just said. Most of the time they're getting into something, they're taking a risk. They don't know what it's going to be. They go through difficult schools, and it's more than just mental. It's physical and mental. That brings another level of difficulty to things. It's why, today I still, I rock, every day. All the time, all around the world, wherever I'm at. I do physical things because it makes me show up better mentally, makes me show up better in conversations. When you do hard things, you're more used to doing hard things. So when the hard thing approaches you, you've already done a hard thing. It's not a surprise. So having that and what I love about, obviously in the military, you're not always necessarily going to get a great boss, but it's the same thing in the private sector too, right? What I love about it though is that you're expecting to work with a mentor and be mentored, and be a newbie, somebody that doesn't know what's going on, and have that leadership. A lot of times we lack that in the private space. So that doesn't mean that that's your excuse to not get a mentor. That means it's on you to go find somebody. And what I love about this community is there's plenty of us out here that are willing to do that mentorship for others. But you can't just raise your hand and say, hey, mentor me. Like it's more than that. Like you need to build relationships with people, make some connections, and you'd be surprised how many people will offer or even, respond and be willing to, because again, to your point, we said this earlier, we want this thing to grow beyond us. I don't want to be the law of the lid. I don't want this thing to be limited to just me. I want this thing to grow beyond me. Like my kids, I've got 3 kids. I want my kids to be smarter, better, more capable, all the things better than me. Yeah. I want them to far succeed me, excel me, beat me in every possible way. That's my job as their dad. It's also my job as a leader, as a boss, as a mentor, as a manager, is to make my staff or the people that work for me or even with me better than me in all ways. If I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm in the wrong room.
No, I get what you're saying, and suspending ego and listening and is really important. Listening is so important.
Yeah.
And also, I think as I've gotten older is to continue learning and being a better listener, which makes you a better communicator, but like all the going back to taking those risks and and getting and making those mistakes and then being willing to take more risk again is really important in your life, right? Like I would not have ever considered going into naval special warfare and screening for that if I didn't go through everything else, because I need to be physically prepared and technically prepared to go into that job. And if I didn't take those previous risks, I would have not been able to do that. And although all that experience really prepared me for when I transitioned from the military to, civilian,
right? Because
I wasn't nearly, a lot of people are really coming out of the military, going into the civilian workforce are really, really, there's a lot of apprehension,
sure.
Because it's a lot of unknowns, but my whole career was going in and doing unknowns, especially when I went and got commissioned as a warrant officer and went to sea and learned to drive a cruiser as a conning officer. Was I scared shitless doing that? Absolutely. Because I had I was, the OOD was probably maybe 24 years old, and I'm 39, almost 40 years old, and I'm going, I know how dangerous this is, and I don't know if you grasp how how dangerous this is. But a lot of lives are at risk. So doing our due diligence is super important here. We really have to all that basically is just think about the worst experience you had or the most scary thing you had when you were in your military career, and think about how you addressed that situation before you're getting ready to transition out of the military, and realize it's nowhere near as bad as that. It's just another challenge in your life, and you'll be fine. Think about how you prepared for all those other challenges you had in your military career and treat it the same way, and you'll land just fine. Talk to other veterans that have transitioned out of the military and talk about their experience.
Yeah.
Find someone that's been out for the military for a while, because most people that retire out of the military usually have 3 to 5 different jobs before they find the one that's right for them.
Sure.
because it's really different.
Yeah. You go from everybody telling you exactly what to do, when to be, where to eat, how to dress, all the things that I was talking to a buddy the other day, and he was literally talking about that. He goes, I served 20 something years. I was an MP. He goes, I got out and I literally I didn't know how to cut my hair. I didn't know what clothes I should wear. He goes, because I just showed up and they cut my hair. Like I didn't have a style. They just cut my hair. You don't think about how little things like that are in those decisions that are just not part of your conversation, because you wear a uniform and the uniform is issued to you and you have a certain haircut that you can have, and there's regulations and all those things. And you get in the civilian world and it's just like, have fun. I don't care what haircut you have. Like I've got a beard and I've got, longer hair than I would, and like all those things. And that's okay for me. I've got earrings. Like, gosh, oh my gosh.
Yeah. I mean, you're now allowed to be an individual, and that's okay.
Right.
You're not allowed you don't have to conform anymore. And also another thing that's really important is your rank in your uniform is not who you are as a person.
Right.
That's sometimes hard for some people when they transition out, because, they were Sergeant Major so-and-so, and that's who they were known as, or they were Command Sergeant Major, or they were Master Chief or Command Master Chief, or
Right.
or Master Sergeant, depending on the service that you're transitioning out. But that's not who you necessarily are when you get out. I mean, you're now your first name and what you can do for the organization. That's who
Right.
you are.
Well, and on the civilian side, I see that a lot too, because it's one thing to have a manager title. There's a difference from my perspective between a manager and a leader, right? I can have a manager title and people that work and directly report to me. That does not mean I've earned their respect and they see me as their leader. They report to me because they have to, but you can be a leader without having the title. Like a lot of my career before I was ever an official having somebody dotted line or direct line report to me, I was seen as a leader, not because they reported to me. I would be their peer, but they would look to me when the shit hit the fan. They'd be like, what should we do? Because you're acting, you're doing something. Whatever Aaron says, let's go do it. Right. Not all the time, of course, but there are scenarios like that. Right. And so that's my point is you can get the manager title, but you still have to work and earn their respect and earn the right to be their leader. And that's
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Like a lot of times in the military, I mean, just because of your rank, you're given certain level of respect, but that's not the same when you transition out into the civilian workforce. You're not that rank anymore. No one gives a shit. What they care about is like, what are you doing for the company? What is your role?
Right.
Your responsibilities, and fulfill that role and responsibility. The respect will be earned.
Correct.
Over time, right?
Exactly.
People will appreciate what you bring to the table based off of what your results are. Your actions will really speak very clearly for that organization.
Yeah.
Right, wrong, or indifferent. I've made mistakes. I've said things I probably shouldn't have said to people, and I've learned that wasn't right. But at the same time, though, it happens, and you grow up and you move on. You're always learning. Even I'm going to be 50 this year, and I'm learning. There's,
not me. I've never said anything wrong, and I've never made any mistakes in my entire career.
Yeah.
And if you believe that, I have some oceanfront property in Arizona I'll sell you too.
Exactly. The thing that I'm learning, the thing that I have to learn over times is like things and I think this a lot. Things that we said and like did early on in our life is not necessarily appropriate these days. And I accept that. But that doesn't define who I am going forward as a person. That's why I think is I am learning and always trying to improve myself.
100%. I'm right there behind you. I'm 47. And I continue to grow and learn every day. I'm constantly pushing myself to be better in all areas of my life, in work, in personal, my fitness, my health, my relationship with my wife, my relationship with my kids, how I show up at work, the knowledge that I have, the skill sets that I have. Like, I'm constantly learning and growing and having conversations like this to make myself better, so that tomorrow, there's an analogy I really love, and we can wrap this up. But there's an actor named Ethan Suplee. I don't know if you know who he is, but he used to be the really big actor. He was in American History X, the really big overweight, fat guy. And he changed himself, and he lost hundreds of pounds. I think he was like 500 pounds or something at his heaviest, and now he's like 200 something. And he works out all the time, and he's healthy and fit. And he actually had a mentor on a movie, I think it was, or a TV series or something. And he gave him this concept of kill your clone. And the concept is, every day at midnight, there is a clone of you. And you have 24 hours to improve yourself. And if you don't, because at midnight the next night, you fight your clone. And if you haven't improved, then your clone wins, you die, and the clone carries on. So every day you have to improve. Now, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to, run a marathon every day. It's just 1% better every day. But you should do that every single day in some way. Did you read today? Did you improve in your relationships? Did you improve in your health? Did you improve in your technical knowledge? Like, you can improve in any area of your life, but you have to improve a little bit so that you have you can beat your clone the next day. And when you think about it that way, there's no days off. Like, every day I do something. Every day I'm reading, I'm listening to a podcast, I'm journaling, I'm exercising, I'm having intelligent conversations to be a little bit better than I was yesterday. Because if you're not improving, you're declining. And that's where I don't really like the idea of retiring in the traditional, work 40 years and get a watch and then go sit in front of the TV and not do anything anymore. Because I've seen too many people firsthand that, you hit that cliff and then you go off the cliff very steeply, right? Yeah. And it's because you're not using your mind. You're not improving. There's no goal. There's nothing driving you to give back. You just talked about the ICS, advisory project, and how you built this thing to give back, to be value add to other people. It doesn't mean you have to go out and make millions of dollars, but you're doing something that is keeping you sharp and keeping you not vulnerable. Relevant is the word I'm trying to say, right? Relevant and value add to the space beyond just you and your immediate family, which is all great. But what else can you do to continue to drive and keep yourself motivated to wake up and not just sit on the couch? We all have those days where we eat the ice cream and we don't get off the couch. That's okay. Yeah. Just don't make those every day.
No, exactly. You need a break. Everyone needs a break. Sure. But you can do a little bit each day that's still growing you without exhausting yourself too much, or you can set aside time. Learn a language, learn a second language. Most Americans don't know a second language, or find another passion. Do something that brings you joy. That's important, because if you do that, you will grow. You might not realize it, but you are growing.
And all of those things are directly related. So it's really easy to go get a technical certification because I want to get into OT cyber. And I'm not telling you, listeners, listen to me. If you're trying to get into OT cyber, you absolutely have to have the technical skill sets or you won't get hired. And you also need the softer skills. You need to be able to speak. You need to be able to have conversations. You need to be to relate to people. All those softer skills matter too. So all that to say, all these things are beneficial to you becoming a better human for yourself. And it also naturally translates to your employer and your skill set, and the value that you provide to the marketplace is improved in all those areas. The better you get in all these areas, the better your outcome comes on all the things that you're doing.
Absolutely.
So all that to say, my wrap-up question is always, what in the next 5 to 10 years, what's one thing that you see come up on the horizon that's maybe concerning, and one thing that's maybe exciting that you see from maybe cybersecurity, ICS, whatever lens you want to put on it?
I think one of the few things, or one thing that I think is kind of concerning is I think the level of reliance on automation is going to become really, really heavy with leveraging AI, ML within cybersecurity. And I think there's going to be mistakes made with it because we have a tendency to over rely on technology at certain times until like something bad happens. I think that's just a given. I don't think that's anything earth shattering because I think that's just the way we are very quick to embrace technology as like kind of like a quick fix, because we are very much an instant gratification society.
Yeah.
So I think that's something to be aware of. I think a lot of analytical jobs are going to become very automated, and I think cybersecurity professionals need to be very aware of that and look at areas where they can continue to make themselves valuable to the community. I think that's going to be something that we are going to have to rapidly take on board and prepare ourselves for.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that's something we really seriously need to look at. Because I think I think especially with large organizations that can afford to do this, will do it. I think a lot of cybersecurity professionals are going to have to like look at what's their next passion and where can they bring value to other than what their current job that's probably going to be automated here very soon.
Yep. 100%. It goes back to that softer skill I was just talking about, is doing other things in addition to just the technology side. Yeah, 100%. What about the positive thing you see?
Yeah, it's hard looking at the positive things right now. I think we're going to see some really. I think through some of the automation, I think supply chain risk might really improve over the next 5 years.
Yeah,
I think we might get a better handle on that.
Yeah.
Do I think the secure by design will be embraced and adopted more so? I think it depends. I think it really depends on accountability, to implement it, and whether companies, truly, if they say that they implement, whether they keep it going and keep it sustained.
Yeah.
I mean, we understand why and where we got to this place, right? Because there's we really want to rush, products to the market, and we don't want to spend a lot of time in investing in, developing software from scratch, where it was easier to just, incorporate, libraries and other dependencies into your software product to get it out the door. By, designing it all from scratch. I think that's going to be a challenge. I think secure by design is great. I think it's going to be expensive, and certain companies will definitely adopt it, and others will just continue probably going along with it as is. I don't think it's going to be uniform. Yeah, until they can't, until some sort of regulatory requirement and fines are hefty enough to hold them accountable. But we'll see. It's going to be an interesting ride over the next 4 years. So that's all I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, 100%. All right. So call to action. How do people get a hold of you? Find out more about the ICS Advisory Project. Where are you going to be speaking, being at, all that kind of good stuff?
Yeah. So the ICS Advisory Project has a website. Go to www.icsadvisoryproject.com, or you can just do a Google search for ICS Advisory Project. It's updated as advisors come out on Monday or on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then you can sign up and get the weekly summaries sent to you and via email through the website. I send those out early Monday morning or midnight on Sunday. or Monday, and you'll get a copy of the Excel file summary of all the advisories I find outside of the CISA ICS advisories. So even if there's not a CVE associated, some vendors put out advisories anyways, and I include those along with the slide deck that I do a summary of all the advisory project dashboards for that week. And then where I'm going to be, where I will be at next conference, I'll be at the CISA Level 0 conference that's coming up here, since I'm on the board for that, for the awards board. And then I will be at the NRACA Cybertech Co-op conference in Colorado in June. I plan to be running the packet capture kit challenge table there for Ampex, and that'll be a very exciting thing. We're going to have it set up where there's be 4 laptops with different packet capture challenges of OT ICS protocols that people can then find the specific flag associated with the challenge. I think that'll be a lot of fun. We thought it would be a good idea to have something hands-on, because conferences don't always have hands-on things like that. So the last one had a really awesome table for soldering and building your badge. At the last conference in Crystal City. So this year, that's the one I'll be supporting. Other than that, I'll announce whatever conference I'm going next. I won't be at S4 this year, unfortunately, but next year, hopefully.
Well, at this point, I would always like seeing everybody at all these at these different conferences. But now there's just so many that we can't go to them all. It's impossible. There's just too many to spread that.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I get it for sure. Well, hey, sir, I really appreciate your time. Awesome conversation. A lot of good info. Definitely reach out, folks. We'll put all the links in the show notes, so definitely check that out. Reach out to Dan. He has a lot of information. Obviously, check out ICS Advisory Project. Really cool stuff there. If you are an asset owner, you should definitely be looking at that and narrowing down the advisories that are specific to your environment to help you, communicate the risk and understand and prioritize the risk for your environment based on, advisories and known releases based upon that stuff. So thanks again for your time today, sir. I really appreciate it. Until next time, I'll see you then.
Likewise. Thank you, Aaron.
Thanks for joining us on Protect It All, where we explore the crossroads of IT and OT cybersecurity. Remember to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to stay ahead in this ever-evolving field. Until next time.